To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Dave Faulkner adjusted his tie one last time before heading downstairs to the kitchen where the aroma of fresh coffee greeted him. At 35, he had built everything he dreamed of: a successful security consulting firm, a beautiful home in Millfield's most prestigious neighborhood, and a loving marriage to Kelly, his college sweetheart. "Morning, honey." Kelly smiled, her auburn hair catching the morning sunlight streaming through their bay windows. She handed him his favorite mug, the one she'd given him when he'd landed his first big contract 5 years ago. "Big day ahead." "The Morrison account presentation," Dave replied, kissing her forehead. "If we land this one, we'll be set for the next 3 years." His firm, Faulkner Security Solutions, had grown from a one-man operation to employing 12 specialists. Dave's background in military intelligence and his sharp analytical mind had earned him a reputation for solving complex security challenges that others couldn't crack. "You'll get it," Kelly said confidently. "You always do." She was right. Dave's success rate was legendary. He'd never lost a client to a security breach, never failed to deliver on a promise. His methodical approach and ability to think 3 steps ahead of potential threats had made him the go-to consultant for high-profile clients throughout the state. As Dave loaded his briefcase, he noticed the new garbage truck pulling up outside. Millfield had recently switched waste management companies, and the new crew had been working their route for about 3 weeks now. What struck Dave as odd was how the garbage man always seemed to be watching their house specifically. Through the window, Dave observed the man, tall, lean, probably in his 40s, with graying temples and alert eyes that didn't match the casual demeanor of most sanitation workers. The man's movements were too precise, too observant. Dave's trained eye caught details others would miss. The way the man scanned the street before approaching each house, how his gaze lingered on windows and entry points, the subtle way he positioned himself to have clear sight lines in multiple directions. "Our new garbage man seems different," Dave mentioned to Kelly, who joined him at the window. "Different how?" she asked, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Just aware. Most waste management workers focus on their job and move on. This guy's constantly surveying the neighborhood like he's conducting reconnaissance." Kelly laughed. "Your security consultant brain is working overtime again. Maybe he's just thorough." Dave smiled, but his instincts rarely led him astray. In his line of work, paying attention to anomalies had saved lives and prevented disasters. Still, he had bigger concerns today. The Morrison presentation could triple his company's revenue. The morning proceeded normally until Dave stepped outside to get into his car. The garbage man was directly across the street, and their eyes met. Instead of the brief, polite nod most people exchanged, the man held Dave's gaze for several long seconds. His expression was intense, almost urgent, as if he wanted to communicate something but couldn't. Dave felt a chill run down his spine, the same feeling he'd gotten in Afghanistan when something was about to go very wrong. He'd learned to trust that instinct. It had kept his unit alive through 3 tours of duty. "Morning," Dave called out, testing the waters. The garbage man nodded slowly, but said nothing. He continued loading trash, but Dave noticed he kept glancing back at the house, specifically at the second-floor windows where their bedroom was located. As Dave drove to his office downtown, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was brewing. His phone buzzed, a text from his business partner and best friend since military service, Preston Rose. "Ready to crush this presentation?" Dave smiled. Preston had been his sergeant in Afghanistan, and they'd started the company together when they returned to civilian life. Preston handled the technical security installations, while Dave managed client relations and strategic planning. Their partnership was built on absolute trust and complementary skills. At the office, Dave reviewed his presentation materials one final time. The Morrison Group owned a chain of high-end jewelry stores and needed a comprehensive security overhaul after a series of sophisticated heists had hit similar businesses across 3 states. Dave's proposal included cutting-edge surveillance systems, advanced alarm protocols, and a revolutionary tracking system he developed that could monitor merchandise movement in real time. "You nervous?" Preston asked, leaning against Dave's office doorframe. At 6'3" with broad shoulders and a perpetually serious expression, Preston still carried himself like the soldier he'd once been. Never, Dave replied. But something weird happened this morning. Our new garbage man was acting strangely, watching the house, making eye contact like he wanted to tell me something. Preston's expression sharpened. Want me to run a background check on the waste management company? Maybe. Let's see how today goes first. The Morrison presentation went flawlessly. Within 2 hours, Dave had secured a 3-year contract worth $2.8 million. The clients were impressed by his detailed threat assessments and innovative solutions. As he drove home that evening, Dave felt the satisfaction of another professional victory. But as he turned onto his street, that familiar unease returned. The garbage truck was long gone. Collection happened in the morning, yet Dave noticed a dark sedan parked 3 houses down that hadn't been there when he left. The driver appeared to be reading something, but Dave's trained eye caught the periodic glances toward his house. Dave parked in his driveway, but didn't immediately get out. Instead, he studied the sedan through his mirrors. The driver was a heavy-set man in his 50s, wearing a suit that looked expensive but ill-fitting. After a few minutes, the man started his engine and drove away, but not before giving Dave's house one last long look. Inside, Kelly was preparing dinner, humming softly to herself. The domestic scene should have been comforting, but Dave's mind was racing through possibilities. 2 unusual surveillance incidents in one day went beyond coincidence. How did the presentation go? Kelly asked, kissing him as he entered the kitchen. Perfect. We got the contract. Dave forced a smile, not wanting to worry her unnecessarily. Hey, did you notice anyone parked on our street this afternoon? Dark sedan, maybe around 3 o'clock. Kelly thought for a moment. I did see a car when I got home from grocery shopping, but I didn't think anything of it. What? Probably nothing. Just being cautious. That night, Dave found himself standing at their bedroom window, looking out at the street. Everything appeared normal. Porch lights casting familiar shadows, the occasional car passing through their quiet neighborhood. But something felt different, like the calm before a storm. His military training had taught him to trust his instincts, and those instincts were screaming that tomorrow would bring answers he might not be prepared for. Chapter 2. The Warning. The next morning arrived gray and overcast, matching Dave's uneasy mood. He'd slept fitfully, waking several times to check the street from their bedroom window. Each time, everything appeared normal, but the feeling of being watched persisted. Dave was loading his briefcase when he heard the familiar rumble of the garbage truck. This time, instead of observing from inside, he decided to take out the trash himself, an excuse to get closer to the mysterious sanitation worker. I'll be right back, he told Kelly, grabbing the kitchen trash bag. The garbage man was working his way down their side of the street, but his pace seemed deliberately slow, as if he was timing his arrival at Dave's house for when Dave would be outside. As Dave approached the curb with his trash bag, the man looked up with that same intense stare. Morning, Dave said, trying to sound casual while studying the man's face. Up close, he could see old scars on the man's hands and forearms, the kind that came from fights, not accidents. Despite the garbage collector's uniform, everything about this man screamed law enforcement or military. Dave Faulkner? The man asked quietly, confirming Dave's suspicions that this encounter was planned. That's right. Do we know each other? The garbage man glanced around nervously, then stepped closer. Vernon man, I need to talk to you, but not here. Too exposed. Dave's pulse quickened. What's this about? You're in danger. Your wife too. But I can't explain here. There are eyes on this street every day now. Vernon's voice carried the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to giving orders under pressure. Eyes. What kind of danger? Vernon threw Dave's trash bag into the truck, maintaining the appearance of a routine collection. Meet me tonight. The old Miller Steel warehouse on Industrial Avenue. Midnight. Come alone, and make sure you're not followed. Why should I trust you? Vernon hesitated, then lifted his shirt just enough to reveal a badge clipped to his belt. Not a garbage company ID, but something official that Dave couldn't quite read from his angle. Because if you don't, by tomorrow morning, you'll be dead or in federal custody, and your wife will be a widow. The gravity in Vernon's voice convinced Dave this wasn't a hoax. What should I tell my wife? Nothing. Act normal. If they suspect you know anything, they'll move up their timeline. Vernon climbed back onto his truck. Midnight, Dave. Your life depends on it. As the garbage truck drove away, Dave stood frozen on his front lawn, trying to process what had just happened. A federal agent posing as a garbage man. Eyes on the street. Threats against him and Kelly. None of it made sense, but Dave's instincts told him Vernon was legitimate. Back inside, Kelly was reading the morning news on her tablet. Everything okay? You look pale. Just thinking about work, Dave lied, forcing a smile. The Morrison contract has some complex implementation challenges. The rest of the day passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Dave went to his office, held meetings, reviewed security protocols, but his mind kept returning to Vernon's warning. He found himself analyzing everyone who approached him, every phone call, every email, searching for signs of the threat Vernon had mentioned. At lunch, Preston noticed his distraction. You've been off all day? Something wrong? Dave considered telling his partner, but remembered Vernon's warning about acting normal. Just processing the Morrison project requirements. It's more complex than I initially thought. That afternoon, Dave made a decision that went against every survival instinct he possessed. He began his own investigation. Using his security company's resources, he started running background checks on recent changes in their neighborhood. The new waste management company, recent real estate transactions, new residents, anything that might explain why federal agents were surveilling his street. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The waste management company, Clearwater Sanitation, had been established only 2 months ago. Its listed address was a post office box, and its business registration led to a shell company registered in Delaware. The company's 3 trucks serviced only a specific route that included his neighborhood and 2 others, all areas with high property values and residents involved in defense, contracting, or federal consulting. More disturbing was what Dave found about recent property transactions. In the past 6 months, 3 houses in his neighborhood had been purchased by companies with unclear ownership structures. The buyers had paid cash, well above market value, and the properties remained empty. Dave's security consulting work had taught him to recognize patterns, and this pattern screamed surveillance operation. Someone with significant resources was establishing a presence in his neighborhood, watching specific residents, and they'd been patient enough to plan this operation for months. By evening, Dave was convinced Vernon was legitimate, but that only intensified his fear. If federal agents were conducting covert surveillance in his neighborhood, something big was happening, and somehow he was at the center of it. During dinner, Dave studied Kelly's face, memorizing every detail. If Vernon was right about the timeline, this might be their last normal evening together for a long time. The thought of anything happening to her made his chest tighten with rage and determination. You're staring, Kelly said, smiling. What are you thinking about? How lucky I am. Dave replied truthfully. I love you, Kelly. I need you to know that. Her expression softened. I love you too, but you're scaring me a little. Are you sure everything's okay? Dave reached across the table and took her hand. Everything's going to be fine. I promise you that. It was a promise he intended to keep, no matter what Vernon revealed at their midnight meeting. At 11:30 p.m., Dave quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Kelly. He dressed in dark clothing and grabbed his service pistol from the gun safe. If this was a trap, he wouldn't go down without a fight. The drive to Industrial Avenue took 20 minutes through empty streets. Dave used every counter-surveillance technique he'd learned in the military, taking an indirect route and watching for tails. The old Miller Steel warehouse sat in a cluster of abandoned industrial buildings, perfect for a clandestine meeting. Vernon was waiting in the shadows beside the building, no longer wearing his garbage collector's uniform. Instead, he was dressed in tactical pants and a dark jacket that screamed law enforcement. You came, Vernon said, stepping into the dim light from a distant street lamp. I need answers, Dave replied, keeping his hand near his concealed weapon. Who are you really, and what's this about? Vernon pulled out his credentials. FBI Special Agent Vernon Mann, assigned to a joint task force Dave had never heard of. For the past 8 months, we've been investigating a conspiracy involving government contractors, defense officials, and organized crime. Your name came up in connection with something called Project Blackwater. Dave's blood turned to ice. I've never heard of Project Blackwater. That's what makes this so dangerous, Vernon continued. Someone's been using your security company's credentials and reputation to cover illegal arms transactions. Weapons that should have been destroyed through official channels have been sold to criminal organizations, and the paper trail leads directly to Faulkner Security Solutions. The implications hit Dave like a physical blow. You're saying someone's framed my company? Not just framed. They're planning to use you as the fall guy for the entire operation. Tomorrow morning, federal agents will arrest you on charges of arms trafficking, conspiracy, and treason. The evidence against you is extensive and convincing. Dave felt the world tilting beneath his feet. That's impossible. I've never been involved in anything illegal. I know, Vernon said. That's why I'm here. I've been investigating this case for months, and I know you're innocent. But someone very powerful wants you destroyed, and they've built an airtight case against you. Who? Who wants to destroy me? Vernon's expression grew grim. That's the million-dollar question. Whoever's behind this has resources at the highest levels of government and law enforcement. They've been planning this for over a year, establishing the fake evidence, positioning their people, waiting for the right moment to spring their trap. Dave's mind raced through the possibilities. His security company had worked with numerous high-profile clients, any of whom might have enemies capable of this level of sophisticated revenge. What do you want from me? Dave asked. I want to catch the real criminals, Vernon replied. But to do that, I need you to trust me completely. Tomorrow morning, when the arrest warrant is executed, you can't be there. You need to disappear, and you need to let me work from the inside to uncover who's really behind this. I can't leave Kelly. You have to. If you're arrested, she becomes a target too. They'll use her as leverage against you, force you to confess to crimes you didn't commit. The only way to protect her is to make them believe you've run, that you're no longer a threat. Dave stared at Vernon, weighing his options. Everything the agent said made sense, but disappearing would mean abandoning everything he'd built, letting his enemies believe they'd won. There's another option, Dave said slowly. Instead of running, we turn this around on them. Use their own trap against them. Vernon's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I mean we let them think they've got me, then we destroy them from the inside. But I'll need your help, and we'll have to be smarter than they are. For the first time since their conversation began, Vernon smiled. Now you're talking my language. Chapter 3. The Setup. Dave returned home at 2 a.m., his mind churning with Vernon's revelations and the beginnings of a plan that would either save everything he'd built or destroy him completely. Kelly was still sleeping peacefully, unaware that their world was about to explode. Unable to sleep, Dave went to his home office and began what would be the most important work of his life. Using his security company's resources and his own investigative skills, he started building a profile of everyone who might want to frame him for arms trafficking. The list was surprisingly short, but terrifyingly powerful. 3 names stood out. Roman Gardner, a defense contractor whose bid Dave's company had exposed as fraudulent 2 years ago. Miguel Preston, Roman's business partner and brother-in-law who'd threatened Dave after losing a military contract. And Eugene Lane, a corrupt Department of Defense official whose illegal activities Dave had uncovered during a routine security audit. All 3 men had motive. But more importantly, they had the resources and connections to orchestrate the kind of sophisticated frame-up Vernon had described. Roman Gardner's company, Sentinel Defense Solutions, had contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Miguel Preston controlled a network of shell companies that operated in the gray areas between legal and illegal arms dealing. Eugene Lane had access to classified information and the ability to manipulate government records. Dave's investigation revealed something even more disturbing. All 3 men were connected to a private military contractor called Ironclad Security, which had been under federal investigation for various violations, but had somehow avoided prosecution through political connections and legal maneuvering. As dawn approached, Dave realized he was looking at a conspiracy that went far beyond a simple revenge plot. These men weren't just trying to destroy him. They were using him as a scapegoat to cover their own criminal enterprise. The phone rang at 6 a.m., earlier than Kelly usually woke up. Dave answered, expecting Vernon, but heard Preston's urgent voice instead. Dave, we've got a problem. FBI agents just showed up at the office with a search warrant. They're going through everything, files, computers, financial records. They're looking for evidence of illegal arms sales. Dave's stomach dropped. I'll be right there. No, don't come here. They asked specifically about you. Whatever's happening, you need to stay away until we understand what's going on. After hanging up, Dave found Kelly in the kitchen, making coffee with shaking hands. She'd obviously overheard enough of the conversation to know something was seriously wrong. Dave, what's happening? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dave made a decision that went against Vernon's advice, but aligned with his own moral code. He told Kelly everything. She deserved to know what they were facing, and he would need her strength to survive what was coming. As he explained Vernon's warning and his own discoveries about the conspiracy, Kelly's expression cycled through disbelief, fear, and finally, determination. "So what do we do?" she asked when he finished. "We fight back, but not the way they expect." Dave outlined his plan. Instead of running or trying to prove his innocence through legal channels controlled by his enemies, he would use their own trap against them. The key was making them believe they'd won while gathering evidence of their real crimes. "It's dangerous," Dave admitted. "If we're wrong about any part of this, I could end up in federal prison for the rest of my life." Kelly took his hands in hers. "Then we better not be wrong." At 8 a.m., as predicted, FBI agents arrived at their house with an arrest warrant. Dave watched from their bedroom window as black SUVs surrounded their home and agents in tactical gear positioned themselves at all exits. But Dave wasn't there to be arrested. Following the plan he'd developed with Vernon, Dave had left through their basement an hour earlier, using a tunnel system he'd discovered during the home's security assessment, a Prohibition-era passage that connected several houses in their historic neighborhood. He was now positioned in the abandoned house 3 doors down, watching the FBI's operation through high-powered binoculars. The agents who entered his home were professional and thorough, but Dave noticed something that confirmed his suspicions. The lead agent spent considerable time on a phone call, reporting not to FBI headquarters, but to someone else entirely. When the call ended, the agent's demeanor changed from official law enforcement to something more personal, almost satisfied. Dave photographed everything through his telephoto lens: faces, license plates, communication patterns. This evidence would be crucial later. Meanwhile, Kelly played her role perfectly. When agents informed her that her husband was wanted for federal crimes, she appeared shocked and devastated. She provided no information about Dave's whereabouts, claiming she'd assumed he left early for work as usual. "My husband would never do anything illegal," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. "There has to be some mistake." The lead agent, a man in his 50s with cold eyes and an expensive suit that didn't quite fit the FBI's usual style, showed no sympathy. "Mrs. Faulkner, your husband is wanted in connection with illegal arms trafficking worth millions of dollars. If you're hiding him or helping him evade arrest, you'll be charged as an accessory." "I don't know where he is," Kelly replied truthfully. After 3 hours of searching, the agents left with boxes of Dave's files and computer equipment, but without their primary target. Dave watched them load their evidence into unmarked vans rather than official FBI vehicles, another confirmation that this wasn't a standard federal operation. That evening, Vernon contacted Dave using a secure communication system they'd established. "The arrest warrant is real, but the investigation isn't. The evidence against you was planted by someone with access to federal databases. This goes higher than we thought." "How high?" Dave asked. "I'm seeing signatures and authorizations from people who should have no connection to a routine arms trafficking case. Someone's calling in serious favors to make this happen." Dave shared his photographs from that morning's operation and his research on Roman Gardner, Miguel Preston, and Eugene Lane. Vernon studied the evidence with growing concern. "This explains a lot," Vernon said finally. "Gardner's been untouchable despite obvious corruption because he has Eugene Lane protecting him from inside the DOD. Miguel Preston's been moving illegal weapons through his shell companies, using your security firm's reputation as cover. So what's our next move?" Vernon smiled grimly. "We give them exactly what they want, a chance to destroy you completely. But while they're focused on that, we'll be gathering evidence of their real crimes." Dave felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the same feeling he'd experienced before successful military operations. His enemies thought they held all the cards, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated him. "How do we start?" Dave asked. "By making them believe they've already won." Chapter 4. The counterattack begins. 3 days after the failed arrest attempt, Dave Faulkner was officially declared a fugitive from federal justice. His photograph appeared on news broadcasts and FBI wanted posters, portrayed as a defense contractor turned arms dealer who'd betrayed his country for profit. But Dave wasn't running. Instead, he was operating from a sophisticated command center he'd established in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Millfield, using equipment and techniques learned from his military intelligence background. Vernon Mann had been reassigned to a different case, punishment for failing to capture Dave during the initial arrest operation, but he continued feeding information to Dave through encrypted channels. The official investigation was being handled by a joint task force led by Special Agent Alice Miller, a by-the-books federal prosecutor who believed she was pursuing a legitimate criminal. What Miller didn't know was that her investigation was being guided by false evidence provided by Eugene Lane from inside the Department of Defense. Dave's first target was Miguel Preston, the weakest link in the conspiracy. Preston controlled a network of shell companies that moved weapons through legal gray areas, but his operation depended on maintaining legitimate business relationships with real defense contractors. Using his security expertise and Preston Rose's technical skills, Dave began systematically dismantling Miguel's network. They hacked into his communication systems, monitored his financial transactions, and documented every illegal weapons transfer. "Look at this," Preston Rose said, pulling up financial records on his laptop. "Miguel's been selling weapons that were supposed to be destroyed through official military disposal programs. He's made over $10 million in the past 2 years." Dave studied the evidence, and he's been using Faulkner Security Solutions as cover, making it look like we authorized these transactions. The sophistication of the frame-up was impressive. His own digital signatures had been forged on documents he'd never seen. Authorization codes from his company had been used to legitimize illegal sales. But Dave had an advantage his enemies didn't know about. Every document created by his security firm included hidden digital markers that he'd embedded as anti-counterfeiting measures. The forged documents were perfect except for those invisible markers. "We need to get this evidence to Alice Miller without revealing our involvement," Dave said. "If she thinks we're trying to manipulate her investigation, she'll dismiss everything as desperate attempts by a fugitive to avoid responsibility." Preston Rose smiled. "I have an idea about that." 2 days later, Alice Miller received an anonymous package containing detailed financial records, communication transcripts, and video surveillance footage documenting Miguel Preston's illegal arms deals. The evidence was overwhelming and completely separate from the case against Dave Faulkner. Miller was an experienced prosecutor who recognized solid evidence when she saw it. Within hours, she'd initiated a separate investigation into Miguel Preston's activities. But when she tried to coordinate with Eugene Lane at the Department of Defense, she encountered unexpected resistance. "Agent Miller, I appreciate your enthusiasm," Lane said during their phone call. "But we need to stay focused on apprehending Dave Faulkner. These other matters can wait until we've resolved the primary case." Miller found Lane's dismissive attitude suspicious. In her experience, federal officials were eager to pursue any lead that might uncover additional crimes, especially weapons trafficking. Lane's reluctance to investigate Miguel Preston raised red flags about his motives. Meanwhile, Dave was preparing Phase 2 of his counterattack, targeting Roman Gardner directly. Gardner's Sentinel Defense Solutions was headquartered in a secured office complex 20 miles outside the city. The building's security was impressive but not impenetrable to someone with Dave's skills and resources. On a rainy Thursday night, Dave infiltrated Gardner's offices while Preston Rose hacked the building's surveillance systems to create blind spots. Dave's objective wasn't theft or sabotage. He needed evidence of Gardner's connection to the conspiracy against him. What he found exceeded his expectations. Gardner's private office contained a safe with documents detailing the entire operation to frame Dave. The papers included payments to corrupt federal agents, forged evidence linking Dave to illegal arms sales, and a timeline for destroying Faulkner Security Solutions and seizing its client contracts. But the most shocking discovery was a letter from Eugene Lane promising Gardner exclusive access to future military contracts worth over $500 million in exchange for eliminating Dave as a competitor. Dave photographed everything, but as he prepared to leave, he heard security guards entering the building for an unscheduled patrol. Using his military training, Dave evaded detection by hiding in the building's ventilation system until the guards completed their rounds. The next morning, Alice Miller received another anonymous package, this time containing evidence of Roman Gardner's corruption and his connection to Eugene Lane. The documents were accompanied by a note. "Agent Miller, the real criminals are using Dave Faulkner as a scapegoat to cover their own crimes." The evidence speaks for itself. Miller studied the new evidence with growing concern. The documents clearly showed a conspiracy involving high-level Department of Defense officials, but they also raised questions about the legitimacy of the case against Dave Faulkner. When Miller tried to discuss her findings with her superiors, she encountered more resistance. The special prosecutor assigned to oversee the Faulkner case, Russell Wade, dismissed her concerns about Gardner and Lang. "Agent Miller, your job is to capture Dave Faulkner, not chase conspiracy theories," Wade said coldly. "These documents could be sophisticated fakes created by Faulkner himself to misdirect our investigation." But Miller was too experienced to be easily manipulated. She began conducting her own investigation into Wade's background and discovered disturbing connections to the same defense contracting network that included Gardner and Preston. Russell Wade had received campaign contributions from Sentinel Defense Solutions when he'd run for state attorney general 5 years earlier. His law firm had represented clients with connections to Miguel Preston's shell companies. The special prosecutor assigned to ensure Dave Faulkner's conviction had clear conflicts of interest that should have disqualified him from the case. Miller made a decision that would either advance her career or destroy it. She contacted Vernon Mann through secure channels to share her discoveries. "Agent Miller, I've been hoping someone like you would see through this fabrication," Vernon told her during their clandestine meeting. "Dave Faulkner is innocent, but proving it will require exposing corruption at the highest levels of law enforcement and government. Are you saying the entire case against Faulkner is fraudulent?" "I'm saying Dave Faulkner is the most honorable man I've ever met, and someone very powerful wants him destroyed to cover their own crimes." Miller studied Vernon's face, reading the sincerity in his expression. "What do you need from me? Help us catch the real criminals. But be careful, they have people everywhere, and they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens their operation." As Miller left the meeting, she didn't notice the photographer hidden across the street, documenting her contact with Vernon Mann. By morning, Russell Wade would know that his case was compromised by a federal agent who'd chosen the wrong side. The stakes had just increased dramatically for everyone involved. Chapter 5: Escalation. The photograph of Alice Miller meeting with Vernon Mann landed on Russell Wade's desk at 6 a.m., courtesy of a private investigator whose services came with no questions asked and complete discretion guaranteed. Wade studied the image with cold satisfaction. Agent Miller had just made a career-ending mistake. Within 2 hours, Miller found herself summoned to an emergency meeting with federal prosecutors, internal affairs investigators, and Russell Wade himself. The conference room felt more like an interrogation chamber as Wade placed the surveillance photograph on the table. "Agent Miller, you've been photographed meeting with Vernon Mann, a suspended federal agent who's suspected of aiding and abetting fugitive Dave Faulkner," Wade said with prosecutorial authority. "Care to explain?" Miller had anticipated this moment. "Agent Mann contacted me with information relevant to our investigation. He provided evidence of corruption that directly impacts the Faulkner case. Evidence or disinformation designed to derail a legitimate federal prosecution?" Wade countered. "Agent Mann has been removed from this case for compromising the investigation. His credibility is questionable at best." The internal affairs investigator, a stern woman named Catherine Lucas, leaned forward. "Agent Miller, you've been conducting unauthorized investigations into subjects outside your assigned case parameters. This suggests either poor judgment or deliberate insubordination." Miller felt the walls closing in but maintained her composure. "I've been following evidence wherever it leads, which is what good investigators do. The documents I've received clearly show a conspiracy involving Roman Gardner, Miguel Preston, and Eugene Lang. Ignoring that evidence would be negligent." Russell Wade smiled coldly. "Those documents are sophisticated forgeries created by Dave Faulkner to misdirect our investigation. He's a security expert with the technical skills to fabricate convincing evidence. The fact that you've been manipulated by a fugitive raises serious questions about your competence." "And if they're not forgeries?" Miller challenged. "If there really is a conspiracy, and we're helping cover it up by pursuing an innocent man?" The room fell silent. Wade exchanged glances with Catherine Lucas, and Miller realized she'd just sealed her fate. "Agent Miller, you're suspended pending a full internal investigation," Lucas announced. "Turn in your badge and weapon. Any further contact with Vernon Mann or attempts to interfere with the Faulkner case will result in criminal charges." As Miller left federal headquarters, she knew her career was effectively over. But she also knew she was right about the conspiracy, and she wasn't going to let them destroy an innocent man to cover their crimes. Meanwhile, Dave was preparing the most dangerous phase of his counterattack. His evidence against Gardner, Preston, and Lane was overwhelming, but he needed something that would force immediate action from law enforcement agencies that couldn't be corrupted or intimidated. The solution came from an unexpected source. "Kelly, what if you went public?" she suggested during one of their secret meetings in the abandoned warehouse. "Not through normal media channels. They'd dismiss you as a desperate fugitive, but through someone who has credibility and can't be bought." Dave considered the idea. "Who did you have in mind?" "Senator Lowell Parker. Remember the security assessment you did for his campaign headquarters 2 years ago? He was impressed by your integrity and professionalism. More importantly, he chairs the Senate Committee on Government Oversight." Senator Parker was known for his relentless pursuit of government corruption, regardless of party affiliation. If Dave could get evidence to Parker through channels that couldn't be traced, the senator would be obligated to investigate. But reaching Parker would require extraordinary measures. The senator was heavily protected, and Dave was a wanted fugitive who couldn't risk direct contact. The solution came through Preston Rose's extensive network of former military contacts. A retired Marine named Corey Chase, who now worked as Parker's personal security chief, had served with Preston in Iraq. Chase was a man of absolute integrity who would evaluate evidence on its merits rather than its source. "Corey owes me his life," Preston explained. "I pulled him out of a burning vehicle in Fallujah. If I ask him to look at something, he'll look at it." 3 days later, Senator Parker's chief of staff received an encrypted package containing comprehensive evidence of the conspiracy against Dave Faulkner. The materials included financial records proving illegal arms sales, communication transcripts showing coordination between Gardner, Preston, and Lane, and documentation of the fabricated evidence used to frame Dave. Senator Parker studied the evidence with his top investigators, including former FBI agents and military intelligence specialists. Their conclusion was unanimous. Dave Faulkner was the victim of an elaborate frame-up designed to cover massive government corruption. Parker immediately contacted FBI Director Lorenzo Stevens, demanding a complete review of the Faulkner case and an investigation into Russell Wade's handling of the prosecution. "Director Stevens, I have evidence that one of your agents is being used to cover up crimes involving hundreds of millions of dollars in illegal arms sales," Parker said during their secure phone call. "Either the FBI investigates this immediately, or I'll hold public hearings that will make your agency look incompetent at best, corrupt at worst." Stevens was a career law enforcement officer who'd built the FBI's reputation on integrity and competence. The suggestion that his agency was being manipulated by outside interests triggered his deepest professional instincts. "Senator, I'll assign my best investigators to review everything you've provided. If there's corruption in this case, we'll expose it regardless of who's involved." But Russell Wade had anticipated this development. Within hours of Parker's call to Director Stevens, Wade contacted Eugene Lane with a warning: "We have a problem. Senator Parker has the evidence, and the FBI director is launching a review. We need to accelerate our timeline." Lane's response was swift and ruthless. "Eliminate the source. Make it look like Faulkner died resisting arrest, and this whole problem disappears." That night, a tactical team of contractors working for Ironclad Security surrounded Dave's warehouse command center. But Dave's military training and paranoid security measures had prepared him for exactly this scenario. Motion sensors placed throughout the industrial district alerted him to the approaching team 15 minutes before they reached his position. Security cameras showed 12 heavily armed men using military-grade equipment and coordination that suggested professional training. "Preston, we need to evacuate now," Dave said, grabbing essential equipment while his partner initiated their predetermined escape protocol. The warehouse was equipped with multiple exit routes, including a tunnel system Dave had constructed that led to a drainage canal a quarter-mile away. But as they prepared to leave, Dave made a decision that surprised even himself. "Change of plans," he said. "We're not running." Preston stared at him. "Dave, there are 12 armed men outside who've been sent to kill us." "Exactly. Which means they're not law enforcement. They're criminal contractors. And that gives us options that law enforcement would never consider." Dave's expression hardened with the cold determination Preston had seen during their most dangerous military operations. These people have been trying to destroy my life for months. Now they've come to my territory, and they're about to learn why that was a mistake. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. Dave's warehouse command center had been designed with exactly this scenario in mind. During his weeks of preparation, he'd installed sophisticated defensive measures that would have impressed his former military commanders: motion sensors, remote-controlled barriers, diversionary devices, and weapons caches positioned throughout the building. The 12-man ironclad security team approached the warehouse using standard tactical formations, confident that they were facing a lone fugitive and his civilian partner. They had no idea they were walking into a trap prepared by a military intelligence specialist who'd spent months planning for this moment. Dave watched their approach through thermal imaging cameras, identifying their leader, a tall man with silver hair who moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Through facial recognition software, Dave identified him as Terrence Robinson, a former Army Special Forces colonel who now worked as Ironclad's head of operations. "Preston, take position at exit point 3, Dave instructed through their secure communication system. "If this goes wrong, you run and get the evidence to Vernon Mann. I'm not leaving you to face 12 armed men alone. You're not. You're my ace in the hole." Dave activated the warehouse's defensive systems as Robinson's team reached the perimeter. The first surprise came when motion-activated floodlights suddenly illuminated the area, temporarily blinding the attackers and destroying their night vision advantage. Robinson's voice crackled through their team radio. "Lights out, move to backup positions." But Dave was already 3 moves ahead. As the team scattered to avoid the lights, they triggered pressure sensors that activated smoke dispensers throughout the area. Within seconds, the warehouse district was shrouded in thick, artificial fog that made coordinated movement impossible. From his elevated position inside the warehouse, Dave used thermal imaging to track each team member's location while they stumbled blindly through the artificial haze. He activated a series of remote-controlled speakers hidden throughout the area, creating false audio signals that suggested movement in multiple directions. Robinson's professional composure was cracking. "Team 2, report your position." "Team 3, what's your status?" The responses revealed confusion and growing frustration as the tactical team found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see or locate. Dave's psychological warfare was just beginning. Using voice modulation equipment, he broadcast a message through the speakers that echoed throughout the warehouse district. "Terrence Robinson, former Army Special Forces, now working for criminals who frame innocent men. You're trespassing on private property with intent to commit murder. Leave now, or face the consequences." Robinson's team was trained for conventional combat, not psychological operations conducted by someone who understood military tactics better than they did. The combination of smoke, false audio signals, and Dave's intimate knowledge of the terrain was breaking down their unit cohesion. But Dave's real advantage was patience. While Robinson's team grew increasingly frustrated and disoriented, Dave methodically documented everything through high-definition cameras: faces, license plates, communication patterns, weapons used, and tactical procedures that clearly identified this as a criminal operation rather than legitimate law enforcement. After 30 minutes of futile searching, Robinson made a fatal mistake. He contacted Eugene Lane directly through an unsecured communication channel, not knowing that Dave was monitoring all radio frequencies in the area. "Lane, we can't locate the target," Robinson reported. "The site is too well defended, and he's using military-grade countermeasures. We need backup or better intelligence." Lane's response was captured clearly by Dave's recording equipment. "Robinson, you have one job. Eliminate Dave Faulkner permanently and make it look like he died resisting arrest. I don't care what resources you need, but this problem ends tonight." Dave smiled grimly. Eugene Lane had just provided recorded evidence of conspiracy to commit murder involving a Department of Defense official. "Preston, are you getting this?" Dave asked through their secure channel. "Every word. We've got them." Dave's next move was inspired by his military experience with urban warfare. Instead of confronting Robinson's team directly, he began systematically isolating them using diversionary tactics and false targets. Remote-controlled devices placed throughout the warehouse district created the illusion of movement in multiple locations simultaneously. Robinson's team found themselves chasing shadows while Dave gathered intelligence on their equipment, tactics, and communication protocols. The psychological pressure finally broke one of Robinson's younger operatives, who panic-fired at a remote-controlled decoy, revealing his position to Dave's thermal imaging cameras. "Hold your fire," Robinson commanded, but his authority was clearly deteriorating. Dave decided it was time to end the standoff on his terms. Using a portable loudspeaker, he addressed Robinson directly. "Colonel Robinson, you're being recorded by multiple surveillance systems. Your conversation with Eugene Lane has been documented. You have 60 seconds to withdraw your team, or I'll release evidence of tonight's operation to every news organization in the country." Robinson's response revealed the desperation driving the conspiracy. "Faulkner, you're a dead man walking. Even if you survive tonight, we'll keep coming until you're eliminated." "That's where you're wrong, Colonel. I'm not running anymore, and I'm not hiding. You've just provided evidence that will destroy everyone involved in this conspiracy." Dave activated his final surprise: emergency flares that illuminated the entire warehouse district while simultaneously triggering silent alarms that would bring local law enforcement within minutes. Robinson's team had two choices: retreat immediately or explain to police why they were conducting a military-style operation in an industrial area. Robinson made the smart choice. "All teams, withdraw immediately." Mission aborted. As the ironclad security vehicles disappeared into the night, Dave reviewed the evidence he'd gathered. Video footage of the attempted assassination, recorded communications proving conspiracy to commit murder, and positive identification of all 12 operatives involved in the attack. But more importantly, he demonstrated to his enemies that he wasn't a helpless fugitive waiting to be captured. He was a dangerous opponent who could turn their own tactics against them. Vernon Mann received Dave's evidence package at 3 a.m., along with a message that would change everything. "Vernon, they've just escalated to attempted murder. It's time to take them down." The evidence Dave had gathered during Robinson's attack was overwhelming. A Department of Defense official ordering the assassination of an American citizen, criminal contractors attempting to commit murder, and recorded proof that the entire case against Dave was a fabrication designed to cover massive government corruption. Vernon immediately contacted FBI Director Lorenzo Stevens with the new evidence. Stevens reviewed the materials with growing alarm. The recordings clearly showed Eugene Lane ordering Dave's assassination, Robinson's team using military-grade weapons against a civilian, and systematic corruption involving millions of dollars in illegal arms sales. "This changes everything," Stevens told his deputy director. "We're not investigating arms trafficking anymore. We're looking at conspiracy, attempted murder, and corruption at the highest levels of government." By dawn, Stevens had authorized a new investigation with unlimited resources and complete independence from Russell Wade's compromised prosecution team. The hunter had become the hunted, and Dave's enemies were about to discover that their frame-up had turned into a trap that would destroy them all. Chapter 7. The Net Closes. FBI Director Lorenzo Stevens stood in the Situation Room at FBI headquarters, studying wall-mounted displays showing the extensive criminal network Dave Faulkner had uncovered. After reviewing the evidence from Robinson's failed assassination attempt, Stevens had authorized what he privately called the most important investigation in the Bureau's recent history. "Gentlemen," Stevens addressed his top investigators, "we're dealing with systematic corruption involving a Defense Department official, multiple defense contractors, and what appears to be a private military organization conducting illegal operations on American soil." Special Agent Jackie Lowe, Stevens' most trusted investigator, raised his hand. "Sir, what's our approach?" "The evidence suggests the entire prosecution against Dave Faulkner was fabricated." "That's exactly what it was," Stevens replied grimly. "Dave Faulkner isn't our target. He's our star witness. And based on his tactical performance against Robinson's team, he's also someone we need as an ally, not an enemy." Meanwhile, Eugene Lane was learning that his carefully constructed conspiracy was unraveling faster than he could contain it. Russell Wade's panic call at 5 a.m. delivered news that confirmed Lane's worst fears. "Eugene, FBI Director Stevens has taken over the Faulkner case," Wade reported. "He's appointed new investigators, and they're reviewing all the evidence we've used to build our case. They're asking questions about document authenticity and investigating the original sources of our intelligence. Lane felt his world collapsing. What about Alice Miller? She's been reinstated and assigned to Stephen's task force. Apparently, her insubordination is now considered proper investigative procedure. Lane realized that his only remaining option was to eliminate Dave Faulkner before he could testify about the conspiracy. But Terrence Robinson's failure had shown that Dave was far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. We need to change tactics, Lane told Wade. Instead of trying to kill Faulkner directly, we target what he cares about most. His wife, his business partner, anyone he might trust. Force him into the open by threatening everyone he loves. But Dave had anticipated this escalation. He'd spent the past week moving Kelly and Preston Rose to secure locations while establishing communication protocols that would warn him if his enemies targeted his allies. Vernon Mann's call came at precisely the moment Dave expected it. Dave, we've intercepted communications suggesting they're planning to target Kelly. Stevens wants to bring you in for protective custody while we round up the conspirators. Not yet, Dave replied. If I surrender now, they'll claim everything I've discovered is fabricated evidence created by a desperate fugitive. We need them to make one more mistake. A mistake so obvious that even their corrupt allies can't deny what's happening. What do you have in mind? Dave's plan was audacious in its simplicity. He would surrender himself to Russell Wade personally, knowing that Wade would be unable to resist the temptation to eliminate him quietly rather than risk a public trial that might expose the conspiracy. Vernon, I need you to arrange a meeting between me and Wade. Tell him I'm willing to confess to the arms trafficking charges in exchange for immunity for Kelly. That's insane. Wade will have you killed the moment you're in custody. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Dave's strategy required perfect timing and absolute trust in Vernon's ability to provide backup at the crucial moment. If the plan worked, Russell Wade would expose himself as part of the conspiracy in a way that couldn't be covered up or explained away. 2 days later, the meeting was arranged at a private airfield outside the city. Wade agreed to the location because it provided privacy for what he planned to be Dave's final moments. Dave agreed because the airfield's isolated location would force Wade to reveal his true intentions without witnesses. Wade arrived with 4 armed men who were introduced as federal marshals, but whose equipment and behavior clearly identified them as private contractors. Dave approached the meeting point alone, carrying a briefcase he claimed contained evidence that would incriminate Kelly if released. Mr. Faulkner, you've caused considerable trouble for the federal justice system, Wade said with cold satisfaction. Your willingness to confess and cooperate will be taken into consideration during sentencing. I want guarantees about my wife's immunity before I sign anything, Dave replied. Wade smiled. Mr. Faulkner, you're not in a position to negotiate. You're a fugitive wanted for treason and arms trafficking. Your only choice is complete cooperation. As Wade spoke, Dave noticed the subtle hand signals he gave to his armed companions, signals that clearly indicated preparation for violence rather than arrest procedures. I understand, Dave said, opening his briefcase. Everything you need to convict me is in here. But instead of documents, the briefcase contained high-definition cameras that had been recording the entire meeting, broadcasting live to Vernon Mann's monitoring station and FBI headquarters. Wade's expression changed as he realized he'd been trapped. What is this? Justice, Dave replied as FBI vehicles surrounded the airfield. Special Agent Jackie Lowe's voice echoed through a loudspeaker. Russell Wade, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and attempted murder. The men with you are advised to drop their weapons immediately. Wade's hired contractors looked around desperately, realizing they were outnumbered and outgunned by legitimate federal agents. Their leader, a man Dave recognized from Robinson's team, made the smart choice and dropped his weapon. But Wade himself was beyond rational thought. This is impossible. You're a fugitive. No one will believe anything you say. They don't have to believe me, Dave replied calmly. They just have to review the evidence I've provided, including the recording of your conversation with Eugene Lane ordering my assassination. FBI agents swarmed the airfield, placing Wade and his contractors under arrest, while Dave finally surrendered himself to legitimate federal authorities. But this time, he was surrendering as a protected witness rather than a wanted fugitive. As Wade was placed in handcuffs, he screamed threats and accusations that only further incriminated him. Eugene Lane promised me millions. Roman Gardner said this was sanctioned at the highest levels. You can't prosecute us without exposing classified operations. Every word was recorded and would be used as evidence in the prosecutions that followed. Vernon Mann approached Dave with a smile of satisfaction. Outstanding work, Dave. You've just handed us the biggest corruption case in the Bureau's history. It's not over yet, Dave replied. We still need to arrest Eugene Lane, Roman Gardner, and Miguel Preston before they realize their operation has been compromised. Already in progress, Jackie Lowe reported through his radio. Simultaneous arrests are being executed as we speak. Across the city, FBI teams were moving against the remaining conspirators. Eugene Lane was arrested at his Pentagon office, surrounded by agents while classified documents were being shredded. Roman Gardner was taken into custody at his country club, protesting his innocence while evidence of his crimes was being presented to news cameras. Miguel Preston attempted to flee to a country with no extradition treaty, but was arrested at the airport, carrying $2 million in cash and detailed records of his illegal arms sales. The conspiracy that had threatened to destroy Dave's life was crumbling, and its architects were finally facing justice. Chapter 8. Justice Served. 3 months later, Dave Faulkner sat in the witness chair of Federal District Court, facing a jury that would determine the fate of Eugene Lane, Russell Wade, Roman Gardner, and Miguel Preston. The men who had orchestrated his destruction now faced life sentences for their crimes. The prosecution, led by Special Agent Alice Miller, who had been promoted for her integrity during the investigation, presented overwhelming evidence of the conspiracy. Financial records showed millions of dollars in illegal arms sales. Communication transcripts revealed detailed planning to frame an innocent man. Video surveillance documented attempted assassination and obstruction of justice. Dave's testimony was methodical and devastating. He walked the jury through each element of the frame-up, explaining how his enemies had forged his digital signatures, used his company's reputation to legitimize illegal sales, and fabricated evidence to support their criminal enterprise. Mr. Faulkner, Miller asked during direct examination, what was your reaction when you realized the extent of this conspiracy against you? Anger, Dave replied honestly, but also determination. These men had underestimated my ability to fight back, and they'd made the mistake of threatening my wife. Once they crossed that line, I was committed to exposing their crimes no matter what it cost me. The defense attorneys tried desperately to portray Dave as a master manipulator who had fabricated evidence to cover his own crimes. But their arguments crumbled under the weight of independently verified documents, recorded conversations, and testimony from federal agents who had witnessed the conspirators' actions firsthand. Eugene Lane's attorney, a high-priced lawyer named Guy Schroeder, made a final desperate attempt to discredit Dave's evidence. Mr. Faulkner, isn't it true that you're a trained intelligence specialist capable of creating sophisticated false evidence? Dave smiled coldly. Yes, I have those skills, which is exactly how I knew your client's evidence against me was fabricated. Every document they created to frame me contained technical errors that only someone with my background would recognize. But couldn't you have created equally sophisticated false evidence against my clients? I could have, but I didn't need to. Your clients documented their own crimes through their communications, financial transactions, and recorded conversations. All I had to do was gather what they'd already created. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges against all defendants. Eugene Lane received 25 years to life for conspiracy, treason, and attempted murder. Russell Wade was sentenced to 20 years for obstruction of justice and abuse of power. Roman Gardner and Miguel Preston each received 15-year sentences for arms trafficking and conspiracy. But Dave's victory extended beyond the courtroom. The evidence he'd gathered exposed systematic corruption within defense contracting that led to congressional investigations, policy reforms, and the prosecution of dozens of additional criminals. Senator Lowell Parker, who had been instrumental in exposing the conspiracy, personally thanked Dave during a private meeting at the Capitol. Mr. Faulkner, your courage and intelligence have prevented millions of dollars in illegal weapons from reaching criminal organizations. The country owes you a debt of gratitude. Dave's security consulting firm not only survived the scandal, but grew dramatically as clients recognized his integrity and capabilities. Companies throughout the nation sought his services, knowing that Dave Faulkner was someone who would never compromise his principles for profit. Preston Rose was promoted to full partner in recognition of his loyalty and technical expertise during the crisis. Dave, I've got to ask, when you decided to fight back instead of running, did you know it would work out this way? No, Dave admitted. I knew the risks were enormous. But I also knew that running would mean letting them win, and I couldn't live with that. Kelly had supported him throughout the ordeal, never wavering in her belief in his innocence despite the danger they faced. I married a man of integrity, she told reporters after the trial. I knew that man would never commit the crimes he was accused of, and I knew he would find a way to prove his innocence. Vernon Mann received a commendation from FBI Director Stevens for his role in exposing the conspiracy, despite facing career risks for believing in Dave's innocence when everyone else considered him a fugitive. Alice Miller was promoted to head a new task force investigating corruption in government contracting, using the techniques she'd learned during the Faulkner case to expose additional criminal networks. Even Terrence Robinson, who had led the assassination attempt against Dave, provided testimony that led to the prosecution of Ironclad Securities leadership in exchange for a reduced sentence. The private military company was dismantled, and its assets were seized by federal authorities. But perhaps the most satisfying moment for Dave came when the garbage man Vernon Mann returned to his regular duties, stopping by Dave's house during his morning route. "Morning, Dave," Vernon said with a smile. "Trash pickup is back to normal schedule." Dave laughed. "Vernon, I owe you my life. If you hadn't warned me about what was coming." "You saved yourself," Vernon replied. "I just provided information. Everything else, the investigation, the evidence gathering, the tactical operations against Robinson's team, that was all you. You proved that one honest man with courage and intelligence can defeat any conspiracy, no matter how powerful." As Vernon's truck drove away, Dave stood in his front yard, looking at the home and neighborhood he'd nearly lost. The house that had once been under surveillance by federal agents and criminal contractors was now simply home again. Kelly joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Any regrets?" she asked. Dave considered the question seriously. The past year had been the most dangerous and stressful of his life. He'd been hunted as a fugitive, targeted for assassination, and forced to risk everything he'd built to prove his innocence. "No regrets," he said finally. "We faced the worst people could throw at us, and we came out stronger." "What's next?" Kelly asked. Dave smiled, feeling the satisfaction of a battle won through intelligence, courage, and determination. "We build an even better life than the one they try to take from us." Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 2 years after the conspiracy trials, Dave Faulkner stood before a congressional committee investigating defense contractor oversight, delivering testimony that would reshape federal procurement policies. The man who had once been hunted as a fugitive was now recognized as one of the nation's foremost experts on government security and anti-corruption measures. "Chairman Parker," Dave addressed Senator Lowell Parker, who now headed the expanded Government Oversight Committee. "The reforms we're recommending will prevent future conspiracies by requiring multiple independent verifications for all defense contractor credentials and implementing blockchain-based authentication for sensitive transactions." Dave's security firm had grown into a national company with offices in 12 cities, specializing in protecting businesses and government agencies from the kind of sophisticated fraud that had nearly destroyed him. His reputation for uncompromising integrity and innovative solutions had made Faulkner Security Solutions the most sought-after firm in its field. Preston Rose had proven himself to be more than just a capable partner. He'd become the company's chief technology officer, developing revolutionary security systems that were being adopted by Fortune 500 companies and government agencies worldwide. Our latest contracts include the Pentagon's new cybersecurity initiative and comprehensive security assessments for 3 major defense contractors, Preston reported during their weekly strategy meeting. "We're booked solid for the next 18 months. But Dave's success wasn't just professional. The ordeal had strengthened his marriage to Kelly in ways neither of them had anticipated. Facing mortal danger together had revealed depths of trust and commitment that peaceful times rarely tested. "I've been thinking about our conversation from 2 years ago," Kelly said over dinner at their favorite restaurant. the same place they'd celebrated his first major contract. When you asked if I had any regrets about everything we went through. And Dave prompted, I'm grateful it happened, not for the danger or the fear, but for what it showed us about ourselves and each other. We discovered we're stronger than we ever imagined. Dave reached across the table and took her hand. We also discovered that doing the right thing, even when it's dangerous, leads to outcomes better than we could have planned. Their personal life had flourished as well. Kelly had returned to her career as an investigative journalist, specializing in exposing government corruption and corporate fraud. Her inside knowledge of the conspiracy that had targeted Dave gave her unique insights that made her articles must-reads for policymakers and business leaders. I've got a new assignment, she announced with excitement. The Washington Post wants me to investigate defense contractor relationships with private military companies. Apparently, there are concerns about companies like Ironclad Security being replaced by new organizations with similar problematic practices. Dave smiled, following in my footsteps. More like we're walking the same path together. Your work from the inside of the security industry, mine from the outside through journalism. We make a good team. The man who had once been their most dangerous enemy, Eugene Lane, was now serving his sentence in federal prison. But even from behind bars, Lane had provided information that led to additional prosecutions and reforms. His cooperation was motivated less by remorse than by the realization that Dave Faulkner had comprehensively destroyed the criminal network Lane had spent years building. Russell Wade's legal career was over, his law license revoked, his reputation destroyed. The special prosecutor who had tried to orchestrate Dave's conviction now worked as a paralegal for a small firm handling minor civil cases. Roman Gardner's Sentinel Defense Solutions had been dismantled, its assets distributed to the victims of his fraudulent schemes. Gardner himself had aged dramatically during his imprisonment, the arrogant defense contractor replaced by a broken man who understood too late the consequences of underestimating someone with Dave's capabilities. Miguel Preston's network of shell companies had been completely exposed, leading to the recovery of millions of dollars in stolen military equipment and the prevention of future illegal arms sales. Preston's cooperation with federal investigators had reduced his sentence but couldn't restore the reputation he'd lost. But perhaps the most satisfying development for Dave was the relationship he'd built with Vernon Mann. The FBI agent who had risked his career to warn an innocent man had become not just a professional ally, but a close friend. Dave, I've got a proposition for you, Vernon said during one of their monthly lunches. Director Stevens is creating a new division focused on preventing corruption in government contracting. He's offered me the chance to head it, and I want you as our primary consultant. Dave considered the offer. Working directly with the FBI to prevent the kind of conspiracy we exposed. Exactly. Your experience as a target gives you insights that traditional investigators might miss. Plus, your technical expertise and analytical skills would be invaluable for identifying fraudulent schemes before they cause damage. What would the arrangement look like? Flexible consulting basis. You maintain your private company, but work with us on cases involving sophisticated fraud, corruption, or security breaches. Full access to FBI resources when needed, complete independence in your investigations, and the satisfaction of knowing you're preventing other innocent people from going through what you experienced. Dave extended his hand. Vernon, you've got yourself a consultant. As they shook hands, Dave reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. 2 years ago, he'd been a successful but relatively unknown security consultant. Today, he was nationally recognized as someone who had faced down a powerful conspiracy and emerged victorious through intelligence, courage, and unwavering principles. The man who had once hidden in abandoned warehouses while hunted as a fugitive now testified before Congress, advised FBI investigations, and had built his company into a national leader in security consulting. Any final thoughts about our adventure? Vernon asked as they prepared to leave the restaurant. Dave smiled. I learned that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones who underestimate you. Eugene Lane and his conspirators saw a successful businessman and assumed I would be easy to frame and destroy. They never considered that my military background and security expertise gave me capabilities they couldn't anticipate. And now everyone knows that Dave Faulkner is someone you don't want as an enemy. The criminals we exposed learned too late that when you threaten someone's family and try to destroy their life, You better be prepared for a fight you might not win. Vernon laughed. I pity anyone stupid enough to cross you now. As Dave drove home that evening, he passed the street where Vernon had first approached him as a garbage man with an urgent warning. The memory seemed like it belonged to a different lifetime, when he'd been an innocent target unaware of the forces arrayed against him. Now he was something else entirely, a proven defender of justice who had faced the worst corruption could offer and emerged victorious. His enemies had tried to destroy him, and instead had forged him into something stronger and more dangerous than they could have imagined. At home, Kelly was waiting with a bottle of champagne and news that would mark the beginning of their next chapter. I'm pregnant, she announced with tears of joy in her eyes. Dave felt his world shift in the most wonderful way possible. After everything they'd endured, after proving they could overcome any threat, they were about to begin the greatest adventure of all. As he held his wife and contemplated their future, Dave realized that the conspiracy designed to destroy him had instead given him everything he truly wanted: unshakable trust in his marriage, professional success built on proven integrity, and the knowledge that he possessed the strength to protect everything he loved. The garbage man's warning had been the beginning of the worst and best year of his life. Now, as Dave looked toward a future filled with new possibilities, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Kelly would face them together with the same courage and determination that had already proven unbeatable. The man who had once been hunted was now the hunter. The victim had become the victor, and the conspiracy designed to destroy Dave Faulkner had instead created a legend. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.